Democracy Now! Is currently accepting applications for Director of Development. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Hi, this is Al McFarlane, host of the Conversation with Al McFarlane. You're listening to 90.3 FM, KFAI, Minneapolis.
The viewpoints expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them and are not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on Tuesday. And what a day it is. We've got great information today. My friend and colleague, Coach Leah, is here as is regular on Tuesdays, talking about the world of sports. And she's got a special guest. The celebrated Leah B. Olson is here. They're going to spend the first part of the program sort of reviewing things happening in the world of sports. And then for the second half of the program, I want to focus on the politics of the Supreme Court, the politics of the election, the implications for democracy that emanate from the Supreme Court's decision to, in a sense, some would say, allow a dictator in the White House. He promises he'll be dictator for a day, but I am concerned. If you are concerned, I'd love to hear your point of view, your thoughts, your ideas. So drop us a note in the chat, or if you want to come on the program, send an email to cooper@insightnews.com. We can check out the possibility of sending a link to you to add your voice to today's discussion. I think it's important that we elevate and escalate the discussion. I talked to one of my former and future colleagues this morning, and he said this is really a Paul Revere moment for American democracy, and that now is the time to sound the alarm, because the democracy that we know that we have been working on for a century or two is at perilous risk at this moment, particularly behind the Supreme Court's decision over the weekend or Monday yesterday that, in a sense, gives President Trump the ability to do, a president, but this is targeting Trump, to do what he wants to as an official act and to do it with impunity. I want to hear what you think about that. Let's have that conversation today. Well, I want to begin by thanking again our friends and colleagues over at Build Wealth and 9,000 Equities. That's an organization that's helping 9,000 Black families own a home. Information is at 9000equities.com, thanks to Build Wealth Minnesota and 9,000 Equities. Well, let us begin by bringing in Coach Leah. Coach Leah, Leah Jean Denley, how you doing, Sister Queen Coach Leah? How are you?
I am fantastic. I like to say doing terrific on a Tuesday. You know, you got to get those alliterations going, but it is always a pleasure. And oh my gosh, I'm so excited to also have Leah B. Olson with us as well. Leah.
I'm getting a photo bomb there. That's grandson Reggie. That's cool. Yeah.
Cutie.
Rabbit ears or anything?
Right. And so, he and I, you guys will appreciate this. We're outside shooting baskets a minute ago. So he's
there we go.
Getting ready to try out for AAU next year. So he's really into basketball and Kevin Durant. So we're applauding him and encouraging him to be excited about sports.
Yeah, very, very, very good. Well, they say that the shot is the last thing to go. So I know a lot of people that were great shooters that literally in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s could still just knock them
There we
dead.
go.
So
There we go. So
I'm not part of that group. I was near the basket making a layup. I was not, some floaters in the middle of the paint, but a few things at the elbow, because I did have a decent shot, but it was nothing long range and nothing that any of those things. But
another aside here. I talked to one of my cousins this morning too, and he had sent me a note about the Timberwolves, and their bid that fell short. And so I hadn't responded when he sent it because I'm just haven't been, that keen, because I'm not knowledgeable. Really, honestly, I'm confessing I have before. I keep confessing that I'm one of the people that is kind of sports illiterate. And I said, well, he said, I knew that, Al, but I figured since Minnesota was, way in the game, you'd have a lot of, energy around the Timberwolves. And I do, and I did. But I said, you know what, cousin, I'm the guy, when I worked for the Pioneer Press, this is back in 1968, a little bit ago, 69, maybe 70, I can't remember, that in my second job, I ran across a guy downtown at the towers, down from across from the post office, and I needed somebody black to sit by the pool for a photograph for the Civil Rights Department. That's where I worked, my nighttime job at the Pioneer Press. And a brother walked by and he said, "Hey, man, will you get in this picture with me?" He said, "Sure, I got a minute." So he sat down, took a picture. "What's your name?" "My name is Rod Carew." I said, "Well, what do you do, Rod? What do you do?" He said,
Wow.
I play baseball." And so here's the deal. From my neighborhood and upbringing in Kansas City, I just never thought I'd ever be associated with or have contact or, face-to-face words with a stellar player like that. So I just didn't connect that this was the Rod Carew. He said, "I played baseball," and my awareness of baseball at the time would have been people that played AAA, American Legion, right? So I said, "Who you play for?" He said, the Twins. And
Right.
so my cousin said, "Well, I'm glad they took you out of sports and put you back in news." I said, and so am I, because I was going to I did a disservice to the profession. My confession. Let me stop there.
We're gonna keep you though, because I would tell you, you still are that person that is so supportive of and know the importance of sports in
That's right.
sports in everybody's life and livelihood. So it's very much appreciated, and I feel very much supported. Working as your sports editor for Insight News.
Well, I'm so impressed with you and with
Yes.
Leah Olson. So I thank the two of you and everybody else who really is vested and invested
Yeah.
in
Thank you.
the game, the sport, and the knowledge and the philosophy, and the engagement that this represents. And I think it's important. So thank you. I'm going to step back and let you guys go ahead and talk.
Well, cool. So I told, full disclosure, everybody, I told Leah B, I said, listen, I am not going to talk about the WNBA and USA basketball without your voice and hearing from you in regards to the head coach of the Minnesota Lynx, Cheryl Reeves, who has been named USA basketball's head coach for the women this year. And I don't know why more people are not just cheering and making this announcement on the rooftops of how big of a deal this is. First of all, let's just start with she's an amazing coach. But second of all, there are very few people that get named the head coach of the U.S. Olympic team. Like there's the list is so short. Leah, tell me what your thoughts are as to what is going on, and we definitely want to show Coach Reeves some love.
Well, you're absolutely right, Leah. It is the highest honor that you can have as a coach, and Coach Reeves has proven to be, if not the best, one of two of the best coaches in women's basketball, and she has 4 WNBA championships to back that up, and other ways that she, without outside of the WNBA championships, that she kind of proves herself is that her players always get better under her. And that's something that sometimes you'll see a player will play somewhere and they'll be there 3-4 years and their game doesn't really change. They don't grow as a person. And what you see with players who play under Coach Reeve is they get better, and they're better basketball players, and they're they're really better people because she has a full belief in supporting players in their communities, in social justice. All of the stances that the Minnesota Lynx have had on social justice in Minnesota has been significant. And so she's a huge supporter of that. So that's kind of just in general who she is, why she deserves to have this posting. She has come up through USA Basketball, serving, as an assistant. And, obviously with Don Staley, and they've worked together. And so she's just kind of earned her way to where she's at right now. And this Lynx team that's playing right now was a team that was actually selected by, I guess, some of the media geniuses to be ninth in the WNBA, and they're sitting at the top of the standings. A team now people are saying has a legitimate chance of battling for a championship. So that just kind of speaks to who Coach Reeve is.
Exactly. And I'm saying that the only one that's surprised, or nobody saw this coming for the Lynx, and except for them. And you make such a very, very, very valid point too, that players that play under Coach Reeve, they understand that the holistic approach to them being better is going to manifest itself on the court.
Yeah.
And if people don't realize that is the formula, too bad for them.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about that is that's the type of players that Coach Reeve attracts to Minnesota and who she goes out to find to come to Minnesota. So we only really have one true superstar in Nafisa Collier, who will be in the MVP conversation. Asia Wilson leading the way in that, but Fee is probably second or third in that conversation. So completely
Absolutely.
legit. Yeah, absolutely legitimate star. Everybody else on the team is considered a role player. And so that's what kind of makes this team really different from the past Lynx teams that have won championships, because those teams were just full of star players. This is just a group of athletes that at the right time all play very unselfish basketball and have come together and understand, like, the way that we're going to win is to lead with our defense and play efficient offense. And they have done that consistently this season at a high level.
Did you get a chance to, because I don't think you're going on the road with them, but the Commissioner's Cup game, where it was moved to a new venue, and a lot of people felt that that was very unfair to the New York Liberty, especially since they were in a top ranking. And so do you think that by them moving the venue so far away from the boroughs that it really gave the Lynx a kind of a made it ground zero at that point?
Yeah, it probably did even the playing field for a road game. So basically the team with the best record for the Commissioner Cup should have the home court advantage, and that is what New York had. But then New York Liberty realized that they had a date issue at their arena with the NBA draft, and
Right.
so they got moved out to a different arena, USB Stadium, and so even though they had their fans there, it wasn't the typical floor. Things are different for them, and that's really what every athlete loves about home court advantage is everything about the building, the court, where you like to shoot, the nets, all those good things that athletes love. And I don't think it was great for either team, because the Lynx also probably want to play in the regular building that the New York Liberty play in as well. But it's just what happened.
Yeah. Well, they're definitely, our Minnesota Lynx are queens of the court at this time, and we're going to just continue to bask in the excitement that's going on for this team. I'm so super excited. I want to pivot just a little bit if we can. Did you have a chance to take part in anything happening with the U.S. Olympic trials for gymnastics last week?
I wasn't, but I was invited to some of the events, and a bunch of my friends and family went to it. And the one thing that I'll say, it was that vibe that was happening in the state again when a great big event comes to Minnesota, and there were so many different things going on, and there were so many different people um, out and about, and so the city had that vibe again. That's really critical for a vibrant city, and
Yeah.
we're starting to get that more consistently. But I know you were involved with it, Leah, and I'm excited to hear because, boy, I mean, all eyes were on those Olympic trials. I mean, that's a huge event.
Absolutely. I was so happy to have been in town for that last week. First of all, let's talk about y'all are trying to trick me into moving back home because the weather was magnificent last week. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. I think there was one day with about 20 minutes of rain on that Wednesday evening or something like that.
Sure.
But I was like, man, I really miss this place. And everything's just so, and again, the downtown
Yep.
was just vibrant and just, it was so good to see everybody just so
Yes.
supportive of all the guests that were coming into town. Shout out to Megan from Target Corporation, who was one of the volunteers. Target had about 1,000 volunteers from their staff helping with this event. And that's the other
Okay.
thing that people don't really talk about that much is how many corporations wrap their arms around the events and provide the volunteers. And, you know, because it takes a lot of manpower to pull off a really great event. And I'm proud to say that, you know, my hometown, in the Twin Cities, we do that every single time that there's a major event in town.
Yeah.
It's just a magnificent place to be as a participant as well as a spectator. You know, and I also had my, you know, journalist hat on as well, and was able to do a really super cool interview with, believe it or not, Michelle Young, the Bachelorette that was
Yes.
from the Twin Cities. She and also, I want to remember her name, Leslie, who was the Golden Bachelorette from the Twin Cities.
Yep.
Leslie actually choreographed what I like to call the Nicollet Mall Flash Mob. They had a kind of a
I
pep
saw
rally
that.
type dance fest on Nicollet Mall. There were over 4,000 dancers, which were the gymnasts from the different programs around the Twin Cities, as well as the visitors that came to town. And they all knew the dance. It was the cutest thing to see. And so I'll have some footage at some point. We'll have to show some of that, but it was very, very nice. And Michelle was one of the celebrity dance captains.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we had a chance to break away from that a little bit and talk about her journey. Her journey, as you and I both know, it's not so easy being an African American woman in sports in the Twin Cities. I don't know if it happened to you a lot, but when I was first being recruited, a name like Leah, and being from Minnesota, they expected to see a white girl. They didn't. They didn't. But then there's a lot of other little nuances. So we had a chance to kind of talk about that. She talked
Nice.
about how she was really, her family really supported her being out in Woodbury, and wanted to make sure that not just with sports, but also in the classroom in school, that she was treated fairly and, you know, with her, you know, merit as who she is as a young girl and in growing up and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
there'll be some snippets about my interview with her that I'll be writing about in my column, or on the sports page, I should say. But she has a really awesome program that she's started called Homework and Hoops. And it's based out of Nellie Stone Johnson, which is on the north side of Minneapolis as of right now. But she has, with her MY Foundation, they are wanting to grow this Homework and Hoops program.
Mhm.
And so, Lee, I'd like for us to, if we can, kind of make a promise that we can try to help her to expand her reach, you know, with our connections across
Yeah.
the country.
Well, and I have connected him with Michelle, and let's just let people know that she was a Division I athlete, and who was a school teacher, and she wasn't just the bachelorette. That's what gave her her national fame, but she's from Minnesota, a Division I athlete. She just represents the state very well, and her foundation is going to serve young athletes or young kids who can't get educated and are missing pieces of their education that they haven't been able to get. And so what the work she's doing is incredibly important, and absolutely, I've already signed on to help her. And I'm glad you will as well. But yeah, again, it speaks to the breadth of what sports can do and the reach that it can have outside of just athletes, and how it can serve our community. And Michelle's doing a great job of it.
She is. I told her that she was spot on with her focus. And the more we talked, the more we wanted to talk. It was one of those things we're like, we got to wrap this up. We got to wrap this up. We got to wrap this up. I mean, we had like the pre-interview conversation, then we had the interview, then we had the post-interview conversation. And I told her that I'm her new auntie. And she's like, yay, I'm a new auntie. And then it was just so funny because then she introduced me to her parents, who, and this, of course, is always one
They're
of those
wonderful.
things that kind of lets you know kind of how old you are or how long you've been around. But then their parents were like, because I gave them my maiden name, and they're like, oh, yeah, we know you. And I was just like,
Yeah,
I
but
haven't been Leah
sure,
Frazier in
they
a long
remember
time.
you.
I haven't been Leah Frazier in a long time, but it was really cool. And I love how we're able to use just kind of the sports as a carrot to really push the agenda. For me, it's always academics first, and making sure that we use and utilize large motor skill activity to really help build curriculum. And so she and I talked, some nuts and some I would want to say not necessarily nuts and bolts, but some talked shop from a teacher perspective, from a classroom teacher perspective, because we shared that. And I told her, I said, I'm just living vicariously 20 years later, maybe 30 years later through you. But I really do want to offer our support. And then Al, I want to bring you in on this as well, because again, she's doing some tremendous work here in the state of Minnesota and also in California with understanding the importance of how do we provide a strong platform for after school programming. And then, and let's play some basketball too. And then she'll say the homework comes first. That's why we have homework in the first part of the name, and then hoops. And so I'm really excited to have Michelle support her in this effort as a former Division I athlete, as well as an amazing educator, to use those skills and to help our young people in these inner cities in California, as well as here in the Twin Cities. But like I said, I know we have some reach, and I know that she's onto something really good. So let's try to help her get across the country with some solid programming that we know our inner cities need nationally.
Leah, let me jump in quickly just to keep our listeners abreast of the conversation. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm so excited to be in the stellar company of Leah B. Olson and Coach Leah Jean M. Denley, who's the sports editor for Inside News. And I sit here just listening and amazed at the conversation. So I thank you both for being here on Tuesday. You, Coach Leah, every Tuesday, and you again, Leah B. Olson. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm so impressed. But keep it going, because there's so much more that you want to talk about. Let's let it flow. Go ahead.
So, Leah, if you do have a few more minutes, I do want to go ahead and talk, maybe flip back to the trials. And of course, Simone Biles, at the top of the leaderboard. And she wasn't even on top of her game during these Olympic trials. But because of how difficult her flips are, I guess is what you would call it, the points, even with a bobble here and there, nobody could really, with the exception of Suni Lee, could even be close to her efforts this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's so impressive. Like what she has done in her field has just not ever been done before. And to see a young sister who has been put through a lot in her gymnastics career persevere in the way that she is, and that like her motor just continues to go and go and go. And just it was just a great honor to be able to see her here in Minneapolis and have her be so successful. And you mentioned Suni Lee as well, and you know, Minnesota native, and her story is one of perseverance as well, and making it through injuries. And you know, I don't know if people understand just how difficult gymnasts have it on their bodies. I mean, the physical toll they take is really critical to them. And so, you know, watching those two, you know, small little people who are just huge in their field and are just really exceptional at what they do, to actually be able to see them here was pretty unique and special.
It was. And what a lot of people may not know is that Simone Biles will be the elder sister, the matriarch of the crew this year at only 27 years old. But
Yeah.
she has been around now for quite some time. But so for her to be the eldest and then also be at the top of her physicality is, you know, it's more than a notion. But I would tell you, you always have to, you always should relate how you're feeling in your emotions and in your mental wellness, because there's a direct correlation between that and your physical abilities. So, you know, people want to separate the two so often, but true champions and true champion coaches know that there's that direct correlation.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's going to be a focus this year at the Olympics, is that mental health is something that's critical for Olympic athletes. And it used to be something that wasn't spoken about. People just kind of suffered on their own because what they're doing is incredibly stressful and difficult to do, and oftentimes very lonely and isolating. And so, and then if you don't win, you've put all this time into something that only comes around every 4 years. So there tends to be, you know, oftentimes there can be depression after the Olympics, and many other things that they deal with. So I think it's really important that Simone Biles really brought mental wellness to the public as something we can all talk about openly and have no shame about. And I think that will be critical in the Olympics this year.
Absolutely. You know, I definitely want to help spread the message about mental health first aid. We'll come back to that another time, but just how your mental wellness helps with your sustainability as an athlete. And actually, it just, that sustainability takes you even into your elder years, like for real, like your 60s, your 70s, your 80s.
Mhm.
You know, I'm looking at some coaches that are just still at the top of their game of coaching, and they're well into their 80s. And I look at that for myself as like, wow, I'm happy to be close to this profession for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
Let
well,
let me
go
jump in,
ahead, Al.
guys, and ask. You know, this is off the topic, but if you're comfortable with it, let me know. If you're not, let me know that as well. My obsession at the moment, outside of listening and learning from you, is watching the news. Two big things going on. One, as a Jamaican American, I'm concerned about the havoc that is being wreaked by the hurricane in the Caribbean right now. I think Jamaica is bracing for landfall. I think Grenadines and Grenadines and Barbados were hit, devastated. The Grenadines in particular, St. Vincent and some of the islands in that chain were devastated. Uh, how does news like that affect you just as human beings when you watch the news and watch the news cycle? That's one thing. And I raised the question because I'd like for people who are listening here on KFAI, if you want to weigh in on what you can do, what we can do to both be empathetic and supportive of people who are experiencing this disaster in the Caribbean, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But, you know, we also have the same challenges here in Minnesota with rising floodwaters and storms. That's one area. The second area I'm concerned about and I think you are too, but if you wish to talk about it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is the news over Monday with the Supreme Court deciding that the president had broad authority that made him immune from criminal liability in acts that he committed as part of his official duty. What that really means, how it's going to parse out, given the fact that he's got 4 different trials set up. One that's completed with his conviction on, I think, 30 something counts, and then 3 more in the wings. What does that do for you as individuals, not in your sports leadership, but as citizens of our country and as human beings? When you look at that, what thoughts come to you, and what do you tell your colleagues and friends and your water cooler conversations about what's happening in our country, what's at risk for our democracy? Coach, what do you think? Either one, yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, they're not separated. Even as former athletes, we're still people first. And that's the thing that I think people don't realize, that everything that happens in our environments, everything that happens in our communities, everything that happens in our quote unquote real life affects everything else. It's very much related. So that's the thing. That's the first thing that I want to say. And so, and then women in sports leads the charge whenever it comes to any type of social justice, whenever it comes to rights, whenever it comes to philanthropy, whenever it comes to just all the things, as I like to say. And so we really do lead the charge with the thoughts of how can things, not just talking about what's going on, but how to fix it. Okay. My ear's always to the ground, because I've been working in disaster response for a very long time, starting actually right before Harvey. When I first moved to Houston, they were still reeling from the effects of Hurricane Ike. And that's when I became really interested in sustainable, how are homes built sustainable, and how are families that have been displaced, what are things that they can do to try to bring their lives back together. And I was fortunate to be able to work very closely with the disaster response and donation management after Hurricane Harvey, and then also to help with families that were recovering from Harvey. And so in putting together coalitions of churches through my work with Houston Responds and another organization. And so, this is something that's very near and dear to me. So I will definitely be getting and wanting to know more information. I'm about 60 to 70% sure that even my home church here in Houston has already started to put something in place so that we can provide some type of relief, either financially or through goods. That's one thing that my home church does quite often. And I'm always very interested to know how communities are going to be able to mobilize, and if there's anything that I can help offer as advice or just whatever that is. I'm always going to make myself available for those situations. Leah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say it's an interesting question, Al, because when we think about the amount of news that we can take in on any given day across the world, of what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in the Ukraine and what's going on in Jamaica and weather-wise, I do sometimes have to kind of pace myself and what I can allow in, just kind of when we talked about that mental health protection of it's an incredible amount of information, oftentimes negative and hard to take things in, but being able to still feel like you're in the know and you're not like just hiding away from what's actually happening out there in the world. I think that's a real balance. And so for me, it really is around trying to be aware of what is happening in the world and figuring out things that I can possibly help impact, and letting the rest kind of be there, maybe say a prayer for them or think of them and then have to move on. I do actually find it very challenging because you could actually sit on your computer all day long and take in and feel a lot of the pain of what is happening in our world right now.
Well, let me pivot again back to the question of, the Supreme Court. And I have up on my monitor here sort of a summary from CNN. The headline says, Supreme Court rules Trump is entitled to some immunity in the January 6th case. It's an article that is authored by reporters Antoinette Radford, Maureen Chowdhury, Dan Berman, John Fritz, Aditi Sengal, Michelle Chen, and Owen Dahlkamp, all of the CNN organization. A lot of information, but that just tells you how much and how important it is that people pay attention to look into this. But what they say in their summary of what they're covering is that the Supreme Court ruled Monday that Donald Trump may claim immunity from criminal prosecution for some of the actions he took as president in a decision that will likely further delay a trial on the federal election subversion charges against him. The decision was 6-3 with liberals in dissent. The article goes on to say that this means that this ruling rejects a decision from a federal appeals court in February that found Trump enjoyed no immunity for alleged crimes he committed during his presidency to reverse the 2020 election results. And this decision says presidents have immunity for what they call official acts, but not all acts are official. It says that lower courts have to decide which acts qualify for official or not official. Trump has called this decision a big, big win. What does it mean in the context of the looming battles? It says the former president is juggling 4 criminal cases while battling President Joe Biden to reclaim the White House. He faces a sentencing hearing next week in his hush money case after being found guilty. Now, they go on to say that President Joe Biden ripped the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity, which ruled that presidents have an absolute immunity from prosecution for core official acts, and that he issued a stern warning over a possible second term for former President Donald Trump. Quote, Biden says, there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the president of the United States. That's what he said in a speech yesterday from the White House. And he said that with the Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that has fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, he went on to say there are virtually no limits on what the president can do. It's a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. He repeatedly warned that the limits of presidential power, of the president's power, now solely rest with the choices made by the holder of the office. And he said Trump would be a danger in that role. As I said at the beginning, this is, from my point of view, a Paul Revere moment. It's time to ring the alarm and to create discussions near and abroad about the danger that we have. I know you got to leave in a minute, Leah. Any thoughts or impressions, any feelings?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a critical moment in the history of this country. I think this election will be one that is talked about probably for the rest of our lives. I think that it's going to be filled with lawyers and lawyers trying to break apart what you just said. And the litigation around it is going to be heavy. And I don't think people can sit this election out. And I think it's going to impact all of us in a really serious way. But I do think the next couple months is going to be, we're going to be listening to attorneys and litigators explain what actually is happening and how it really works. And it's going to be fascinating and also a little scary.
Well,
The
Leah,
thing that I want to add is before I run is if the Biden campaign is paying attention to how to make sure that what their message is shared loud and clear. First of all, they need to make sure that they shore up the message. That's the first thing, in my opinion. But secondly, to also look at very innovative ways to get the messages out. I was watching the BET Awards on Sunday, and we understand that Kamala Harris and Taraji P. Henson are being drugged for their segment of the video call, the FaceTime call, and where they're talking about getting out to vote and so on and so forth. I thought it was done very well. The production of it, I thought, was done very well. Of course, I had my production hat on at the time. I was like, oh, they had 2 cameras and they did this and they had the audio that, so I was thinking about that, but then also what the content of what their messages was, I thought was really key. And so that's kind of one thing. And then also to be thinking about, Leah, you may have thought about this as well, how again, the WNBA and other athletes will be able to use their platforms to help share information, and how the campaigns will use the time during sporting events to help spread messages. And that's actually both on both sides, both campaigns. And so I really see that we're going to see a lot of political commentary during sporting events leading up to the presidential election, and probably even after.
is there a cost for athletes to become political, to use their voices and their brands in this arena? Is there a risk? Obviously you look at the taking the knee and what that represented in one career and how it upset the entire apparatus, because the owners of major sports generally tend to be conservative, billionaire, millionaire class people. But the athlete themselves, while they are becoming rich by playing at the level they're playing, come out of backgrounds that are substantially not super wealthy. It's new to them, and many of the athletes come out of some element of the civil rights movement. It's been the civil rights movement that elevated and opened doors in sports for them, right? And some of them acknowledge that, but for the activism of the civil rights movement, we wouldn't have had Jackie Robinson and all of the people that came after that. So what is the risk, and what do you see? How do you weigh, Coach Leah, the level of engagement, not only in the office, but in the community? What do you think? And Leah, thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Appreciate you both.
All right.
Thanks, Leah. Talk soon.
Yep. Take care.
Yeah. So as far as there being a price to pay, I don't necessarily feel like when an athlete uses their platform to make a statement, whether it's through a physical act or whether it's through what they say verbally, that I don't want to say that they care, because they do care, but they've also weighed what would be the danger of not saying something. So it's the value of saying or doing something versus the repercussions or taking the chance if they don't, right? And so, you know, the days of just arbitrarily doing or saying something, especially when you're on the largest stage or you have the brightest lights on you or you have the most fame at that time, the fact of not considering that, that just doesn't happen. Okay, and so they've already thought about that. Many people, many athletes and celebrities and whatnot, they've already taken into account and have conversations with their teams, and not necessarily their sport team, but with their team of people who are around them, that are helping to manage their image and manage, you know, their lives and livelihood. They've had the conversation, and so they've decided that it's worth it to say something, to do something. Now, you know, of course, people think about, you know, Colin Kaepernick and did that cost him, and was it worth it to him? To my knowledge, he's never said that it was not worth it. He has never said that. And so, do we think about, is it going to be a has that cost him his career?
Mhm.
It may have cost him on the playing field, but as far as who he is as a human and who and how he feels when he wakes up every day, I don't think he would have changed his decision. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And so,
Mhm.
and I know for sure that those that have done things even in more recent years, you know, coming out of COVID, you know, and standing up for, you know, during the times when, you know, say her name, Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and, you know, all these,
Mhm.
you know, nobody has doubted those decisions at all. And I will say, I don't think that I can say pretty confidently that now, even going into these elections and what could be the outcome of that, that we're going to hear from athletes,
Mhm.
slash celebrities that are famous saying how they feel, and you know, and groups and teams and organizations mobilizing to you know, to get out, you know, everybody please get out and register, be registered to vote,
That's
and
right.
you know, make your voice and your concerns known. And then here's the other thing that people keep forgetting: it's not even about just the president;
Mhm.
it's down the ballot
Right.
that we is, and actually it's down the ballot that's almost more important.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And so
Local power. Local power.
it's absolutely, and so it's, you know, it's time out for, I'm not going to vote because I don't want to vote for any of them. Well,
Mhm.
no, I'm going to need you to vote and make sure that you're making a vote in your voice heard along the ballot. Make sure that you're educated about what you want to see done, and not just for yourself now, but for your children, for your
Mm.
children's children,
Mhm.
for your children's children's children, because what happens in this next election is going to absolutely affect our future generations.
Let me shout
And
out to Demetrius Pendleton. King Demetrius Pendleton is on the line. He gave us a thumbs up on this conversation, but it reminds me of when we were doing the George Floyd Week programs over at George Floyd Square using his studio. I think it's Listen to Us Studio or Gap Studio uh, that we did our live programs from. He was saying that through that week, because of the Timberwolves in competition at the time, a lot of celebrity artists and photographers and players from other teams were in town. And when they were in town, they came through George Floyd Square. And what that suggests confirms what you just said, Coach Leah, that players are taking the muzzles off of their own mouths, right? And feeling their own power and being willing and able to speak truth to power and recognizing their power in doing so. And that's a wonderful thing. And I think that we need to encourage them, because what they get from mainstream media too often is this contempt that says, you're getting paid $1 million or 2 or 10 or 20 or 100 million. You should be happy and you should be quiet. But what Colin Kaepernick and others are saying now is that I play and I speak. I think, I am. I have a right and an obligation, and that duty, I think, Coach Leah, reflects what you said, an awareness of the generational consequence of what is happening in our lives and community right now. So thank you for saying that. Thank you for sharing that. And we hope that any athletes listening will be encouraged and emboldened. And no matter what your side is, I've got a side that I declare, and my side is one that is progressive and about human rights and about the potential of democracy. And I stand against the side. I dissent, as Justice Sotomayor does and as President Biden does with the Supreme Court that is trying to hand over unleashed power, kingship to a person that's presidential. I may be overstating the case, but that's how I feel right now. And anybody can say it differently if they want to. But I'm encouraging athletes and communities to say, you know what? We have so much at risk right now, so much at stake, and not only for ourselves and our families, but for our future and for the future of the planet, that we cannot afford to be silent. We have to talk and we have to speak out. So thank you for that thought. I'm going to close the show with some more content that I've been looking at that I want to share with people. Coach Leah, any final thoughts or words before we have you check out? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to shout out my roommate here in the office and my colleague, Hope Watkins. Both of us are on assignment serving Volunteers of America and through the AmeriCorps program. And so shout out to AmeriCorps. At a later time, I would love to come and talk about what that means for our communities. She and I are workforce development experts. And so by working together, in our communities here, we're helping people that are wanting to maybe change their careers and other young people that are wanting to maybe go back to school, and providing them with opportunities to have resources. And I say that I wanted to give her a shout out because you guys saw her on the screen, but more importantly, because I'm grateful to have a colleague that we're like-minded and we're out here in the trenches trying to really do the work that's going to help make the difference in our different communities, right? But more so, the programs that we work on is a federally funded program. And again, when I was talking about making sure you're voting down the ballot as well, the decisions that are made by the people who we elect decide how programs like the ones that we're on assignment working are funded, and how well they're funded, and how many people that they're going to be able to reach through the funding, and then be able to, in my opinion, hire or allow for people like us to be on an assignment that are experts, as opposed to, and we're just out here because we just want a paycheck. But first of all, it doesn't pay well at all. She and I are always just giggling about the living wage allowance that they give us, because we're not doing it for that. We're doing it because it's about trying to help people that are in the community become whole within themselves and feel like they're also providing not for just for themselves, but for their families and then for their communities. And so I just wanted to, again, give her a shout out. We try to gird each other up out here in these streets, as we call it. But so thank you for allowing me to share that. But I think it's very closely related to what we're talking about as far as being educated and understanding the importance of everything that's going on right now.
Coach Leah, thank you so much. And we'll see you next Monday as well, next Tuesday as well. And keep up the good work. Let me spend the balance of the program sort of reviewing again some of the content that we've come across. And I'm particularly interested in talking about the comments on CNN regarding what it means. There's an analysis piece. The analysis piece headline says the Supreme Court just gave presidents a superpower. Here's what you need to know. It's analysis by CNN's Zachary B. Wolf, and I'll be paraphrasing some of what I'm looking at in this report online here. He says that with its immunity ruling Monday, the Supreme Court granted former President Donald Trump's wish of all but guaranteeing that his criminal trial for trying to overturn the 2020 presidential election will not go to trial 24 election in November. It also granted presidents in general a definitive absolute immunity, open quote, close quote, absolute immunity from prosecution for core official acts, and said that presidents should be presumed immune for a much more expansive list of acts. That's frightening. He goes on to say that in view of the majority comprised of the 6 conservative justices on the court, the decision does not place presidents in general, and Trump in particular, above the law. But the 3 liberals dissented with a warning about how elevating the president will affect American democracy. He says the decision has the near-term result of delaying Trump's trial, while a court in Washington, D.C. considers which criminal activity that Trump is accused of can be considered unofficial. It also has a long-term effect of placing presidents in a different system of justice other than other Americans. It's like the rule of law. You've often heard nobody's above the law. Now you have to question if that really is true anymore. Some of the key rulings, he writes, what is this new immunity? He said, Chief Justice John Roberts explains it in the majority opinion as including absolute immunity for some actions and a presumption of immunity for others. That's big. Next question, why does the president need this immunity? He says it's so that he can act boldly as president and take actions without fear of later prosecution clouding his judgment, according to this court. Next question, what does it say in the Constitution about presidents getting special immunity? Answer is nothing. And according to Roberts, that's not a problem. And then finally, he says, how far does this immunity extend? He says the president gets at least the presumptive immunity, even for acts, quote, within the outer perimeter of his official responsibility, close quotes, according to the court. But it's careful to add that he gets no immunity for unofficial acts. And despite the broad reach of immunity, the court argues presidents are still accountable. Well, that's a lot. That's a lot. There's one more piece that I want to share with you, and it's from CNN's Tierney Sneed. The headline says how Trump is now poised to avoid pre-election trials in 3 out of the 4 of his criminal cases. Just summarize that. He says that as summer came to a close, as last summer came to a close, the 4 criminal cases that had been brought against former President Donald Trump posed both extraordinary political peril as well as a very real threat that the 2024 Republican White House front runner would be convicted by multiple juries before the first ballot was cast. He says, what a difference a year has made, or perhaps more accurately, what a difference it did not make. Well, listen, we're about out of time. There's more to read. What I'm going to be doing in the weeks ahead is doubling down, reaching out to friends and colleagues and experts around town here in Minnesota and around the country so that we can really get into understanding what the consequences are of this Supreme Court decision, following the election closely. We'd love to have you involved as well. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next week.